So, who is the MSI Thin 15 actually good for? Who should walk away? And does the price make sense for a gamer who just wants a laptop that can handle everyday tasks without looking like a brick? If you're on the fence, the biggest risk is ending up with a machine that's either too heavy for your commute or too weak for the games you want to play at 1080p. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's break down what the laptop does in real-world use, where it shines, and where the compromises show up. First off, the headline specs: an Intel i7-13620H paired with an RTX 4050, 16GB of DDR4, a 512GB NVMe SSD, and a 144Hz FHD panel sound like a typical mid-range gaming notebook. The real question is how those numbers translate when you're actually sitting in a coffee shop, hopping on a Zoom call, and then firing up Apex Legends a few minutes later. In my own experience with similarly sized rigs, the bottleneck usually shows up in two places: thermals in a thin chassis and battery endurance when you start pushing the GPU. On the portability side, the Thin 15 truly lives up to its name. At just under 4 pounds and roughly 0.7 inches thick, it slides into a backpack without adding the bulk you'd expect from a gaming laptop. I've taken it on a 3-day work trip and managed to keep it in the same bag as a tablet and a charger. The Wi-Fi 6E module means you're getting the latest wireless speeds, which matters when you're on a hotel network that advertises gigabit access but often falls short. In practice, I saw download speeds jump from 150 megabits per second on older Wi-Fi to about 350 megabits per second on a 6E-compatible router, cutting game patch times roughly in half. Now, let's talk about the actual gaming performance. The RTX 4050 isn't a flagship GPU, but it handles modern titles at 1080p with ease when you stay in the 144Hz sweet spot. In Fortnite, I was consistently pulling 115 to 120 frames per second on high settings, which meant the screen refreshed smoothly without any noticeable input lag. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was a bit more demanding, but by dialing texture quality down to medium and turning off ray tracing, I still hovered around 70 FPS, enough for a fluid experience on a 144Hz panel. The cooler boost system does its job. The fans spin up aggressively during those intense moments, but they stay reasonably quiet when you're just browsing or typing. I did notice that after an hour of sustained combat, the CPU clock slipped a few megahertz as the chassis temperature nudged the 85°C mark, which is typical for thin laptops. It's not a game over, but you'll see a small dip in frame rates if you push the hardware for extended periods without a cooling pad. The 16GB of RAM feels generous for most modern games and multitasking scenarios. I could have Chrome open with 10 tabs, a music streaming app, and Discord running, and then jump straight into a game without any stutter. The 512GB SSD, however, is a point where you'll need to plan. A fresh Windows 11 install plus the OS takes up about 30 GB. The game library for Fortnite, Valorant, and Minecraft eats another 40 GB, and a few creative apps like DaVinci Resolve add another 20 GB. That leaves under 400 GB for your media, documents, and future titles. If you're a user who likes to hoard large AAA games or store a lot of 4K video locally, you'll need an external drive or a secondary internal slot, something the Thin 15 doesn't provide, so you have to factor in that extra expense. Battery life is another hidden trade-off. On a typical mixed usage day: email, a spreadsheet, a couple of YouTube videos, I saw about 5.5 hours before the charger kicked in. Once you start gaming, that drops dramatically to around 1.5 to 2 hours. The power brick is a fairly bulky 180W unit that you'll need to keep near a power outlet. It's not something you can just toss into a backpack and forget about. If you expect to game on the train or in a coffee shop without access to power for a few hours, the Thin 15 may leave you frustrated. So, who should actually buy this machine? If you're a college student or a young professional who wants a laptop that can double as a decent 1080p gaming rig, the Thin 15 hits a sweet spot. It's light enough for daily commutes. The Wi-Fi 6E gives you reliable network speeds for both work and play, and the RTX 4050 offers enough horsepower to run most popular titles at high settings without breaking the bank. It also works well for light content creation, editing 1080p footage, rendering quick 3D previews, or running music production software thanks to the fast SSD and 16 GB of RAM. On the other hand, if you're a competitive esports player who craves the highest possible refresh rates, or a creator who needs a massive SSD and a GPU that can handle 4K ray-traced workloads, you'll likely feel the thin 15s limits. The lack of a larger storage option and the modest battery life under load are deal breakers for power users who travel.